Thank you very much. I should go to button pressing school. For holding this hearing, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for testifying. Ms. Carnevale, I think that you sort of set the stage when you talked about the changes in the economy and in the workplace and in the requirements that have taken both up and down in terms of where you would get your degree and certificates and the rest of that. And that's why many of us have been very strong supporters of the for-profit sector in higher education, and believe that they do fill a need for many students, certainly adult students as they originally started, people who had to work full-time and also try to secure an education to acquire new skills or a new job or what have you that they saw on the horizon. But sort of like the old saying, friends don't let friends drive drunk. I have a lot of concern about a sector that I've been an advocate for a very long time in my 37 years on the committee, that we've got some outliers here that are giving real heartache to the American taxpayer. And you can keep saying, or not you, Mr. Carnevale, but the panel and other members can keep saying that somehow this only applies to for-profit. It doesn't only apply for for-profits. Of the 55,000 programs, as Mr. Hinojosa pointed out, 37,000 are in public institutions and 5,000 are for nonprofit and 13,000 for-profit. And for the public institutions, they're there because this is the first president that raised issues about the completion rates of two-year institutions, which are abysmal. They're outrageous. But the suggestion that somehow this is just targeted for-profit. I was one of those that went to the administration and said that their original ruling was wrong. But the point is that this is the question. Then the members of the panel suggested that this high standard will force people to leave the field or to cut out non-traditional students. This high standard is that 35% of your former students are successfully repaying the principal on their federal loans in their third and fourth year after they leave the school. What if you're a used car dealer and you went to the bank and said, I want to borrow money, but 70% of my customers are going to default? I don't think you get a loan from the bank for your used car business. But if you're in this business, 70% of your customers might default, and you're okay for the taxpayer to put up the money. And you only have to meet that in one out of 3 years. 1 out of 3 years. And there's no penalty until you really screw up. And this is a burden that apparently this industry just can't suffer. We're talking about maybe 2% of the programs are going to be implicated here. And I suggest, and as I had suggested to the industry, you might want to look internally and think that you got some outliers here that you should have dealt with within the various associations here. This is not whether we support for-profit schools or we don't, because all of us have had experiences in our own community, in our families, of their successes. This is about what's going on with respect to the taxpayer. Mr. Alford, you asked about what's going on with the department and how they came about this rule. I just say anecdotally, I don't know, we have an investigation going on what happened with short sellers and not with the Inspector General's office. I'd say that if the Congress had listened to the short sellers prior to the financial collapse, maybe this nation would be in a different place today. But I want to ask what's going on with an institution that says that they're going to double the volume of their private student loans, as Corinthian College did, to $240 million, and they expect 55% of their private loan dollars to end up in default. And their default rate on federal student loans doubled between 2005 and 2009 to 21%. And they recently told their investors, not the public, told their investors that they're going to manage their default rate by pushing borrowers most likely to default into deferments, forbearance, and income-based repayment. I want to know what's going on there. I want to know when Bridgeport Education buys a college, it takes the price of the amount of money spent on education from $5,000 to $700 per student. I know there's great savings in the Internet, but at the end of that process, 64% of their bachelor's degrees and 85% of their associate degree students are withdrawing from that institution. What's going on? Because when they withdraw, they've already given over part of their Pell. They've already given over part of their student loans. Their account's running down. I want to know what's going on when that same institution then, which gets 86% of its money from the federal taxpayers, It has 30% profit and 30% on marketing. I want to know what's going on at the ATI Career Institute in Texas when the state work board found that 300 of their employed graduates had no jobs at all, and 427 graduates were not employed as the institute reported they were, and the state cut off all of their WIA funding, but they're still eligible for Pell Grants and for student loans. I want to know what's going on. I want to know when the repayment rate for 4 out of 5 of the profit schools receiving the most Pell Grants on the GI Bill is 37 and 31%. I want to know what's going on. It's not a question of whether I support private schools, for-profit schools or not. We sit on this side of the dais on behalf of the taxpayers who are on that side of the dais. And that's why we have these inquiries. And that's why we have a rule that probably does not much more than develop a lot of information. And I think it will cause some people swimming at the bottom of the pool to swim a little faster to try to stay off the bottom. But I think that's a minimum. That's a minimum that we can ask as members of Congress on behalf of the taxpayers. Madam Chairman, if I just might say, I would just say this. We also want to ask what's going on when Indiana, Illinois, and California and Florida have joined to look at for-profit institutions there. Indiana Attorney General asking questions about institutions. Florida investigating 8 institutions on violated the unfair business practices. Iowa, student default rates. Kentucky, job placement, recruitment practices. Massachusetts, recruitment practices and student loan practices.
Mr. Miller, as you
There's
know,
an obligation that runs to us, and I appreciate
as you know, you
very
can,
generous with the time, and I appreciate
you can put whatever your comments are in the record.
I've
Dr.
seen
Rowe?
the record. It doesn't do so well.
Thank you.
But I appreciate the offer.